All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up. See this? This is my boomstick!
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. We just ran down the top 5 comic or purchased top 5 comic issues of 2019. Now we're going to run down Ash's top 10 comic series of 2019. Very excited to have you both back. Perch, you had a great list. Do you think Ash can follow you up?
Oh, absolutely. Ash has got a great mind for comics, so I'm anxious to see what he has in mind.
He has the best Ash in comics as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, dear.
Quit talking about my Ash in public.
All right, so you ready to give us your number 10 comic series of 2019?
All right. My number 10 was Oblivion Song. Robert Kirkman is blowing my mind on the ability to just write these long, I don't want to say drawn out because that sounds negative, but these long sagas of these characters and keep it feeling relevant and interesting. And Oblivion Song, it just feels like this endless onion where you're like, okay, peel back the layer and go, oh my gosh, this is what's really going on. And then you get through that arc and the next one and another layer. And you're just like, how deep does this go? Am I ever going to get to the center of this onion? Because he just keeps managing to keep, just revealing things in the plot that you're just, it's a book you can't even talk about because that's the strength of the comic is following along and seeing how everything unravels. And so when you talk about it, you can't have any spoilers. Let's put it that way.
That's Oblivion Song is really interesting because there's like this weird overall like moral question. The main character, he keeps going back over to this other realm and bringing people back so he can remove them from the list. But when he finally finds his brother, who he's been searching for the whole time, should he have brought him back? Is he making his life better or worse? And I really like the way that Robert Kirkman was able to craft that into the narrative and makes it such a more a full read. It's an experience when you read Oblivion Song.
It's a great book. It's got a lot of depth to it. I think it's being written in such a way that hopefully this is tailor-made for a cable show or some kind of, extended streaming service, but it's a really good series. I hope it's not ending anytime soon because like Ash said, I think there's a lot of layers to the onion we have yet to see.
All right. So what's your number 9, buddy?
Number 9 is a grand old staple, and I'm so glad to see it be able to make a list again. Usagi Yojimbo, one of my favorite Absolute comics since I've been collecting. It's like 35 years Usagi's been going on. And when IDW was going to start publishing, I was a little bit apprehensive, but Stan Sakai is completely in control of his work, and he hasn't really missed a step, and seeing it in color is kind of a bonus. Usagi's classically a black and white book. This is a book that it's hard to talk about sometimes because I don't want to scare people off, but I tell people, look, this is a book that's appropriate for kids. It's a wholesome book. There's no gratuitous violence or sex or adult themes, but it's not a kid's book. It's absolutely a book that has, a grown-up, if you will, mindset that you can share with your kids. Every issue is almost like a parable, so there's lessons to be learned, but it's not preachy. It's not trying to tell you how to live your life. It's just, like an Aesop's fable. The character has adventures and journeys, and he learns things. He meets new people. It's a book about culture. Stan Sakai is a Japanese American who is he's not a natural born Japanese person. He's fascinated with his own culture. So he just deep dives into Japanese culture and then puts it on the page. So you get to walk away feeling like you've experienced Japanese culture. It's so charming. It's not so much as a comic book. It's almost like a cartoon. His art is like a cartoonist style. And that could turn people away too because they go, oh, it's so cartoony. It's absolutely not cartoony. That's just his art. And it adds to the charming, whimsical nature of the characters. It's something anyone should fall in love with. It just barely started its run again. It would probably be higher on my list otherwise, but this is something everyone needs to try. I love this book so much.
Yeah, that one's a really fun read. It is one of the few comics that I can actually show my son and I don't have to worry about it. but the story itself has adult themes and things of that nature, but it goes right over my son's head, and he loves that character and he loves that comic.
It's a really nice book for people who are trying to get their kids or a younger audience into Japanese culture. I think, Ash, you're absolutely right. It does tap into those veins. It's in some ways I put in the same family as work by Rumiko Takahashi and some of the things she did in her career. It's a great entry point into these topics, these cultures, and I like the comparison to an Aesop fable. I think there is that kind of fable element to it. In a world where a lot of manga is kind of judged wholly by, the My Hero Academias of the world, which is, I think, a great series as well. But this truly is, you get some very nice Japanese culture, and I think that's wonderful.
All right, Ash, what's number 8?
Number 8 was a huge surprise for me. I did not expect it. I almost didn't even pick it up. The clerk at the comic book shop sold me on it. But it's Batman TMNT 3. That miniseries, and for a very different reason than I normally would classify a comic as great. I'm getting older, and I really want the more deeper writing, the things that you get, like what Hickman's done. But Batman TMNT doesn't try to do any of that. It just says, let's be a fun comic. This is Batman and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, for crying out loud. But it doesn't go super like obnoxious or silly or ridiculous either. It's like, we're gonna have fun, but we're gonna treat this mashup with reverence to both character groups, and we're gonna just tell a really fun story without just relying on fan service and nostalgia. There's a story to be told. There's an emotional part, which, slight spoiler, one of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from the original Eastman and Laird black and white series comes through the multiverse to expose to Batman and the current Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle groups that everything's in their world is wrong. And I just about lost myself when I was like, and it's just this fun adventure. You get a mashup of like Joker as the half Shredder, half Joker character. It's just, I can't emphasize like just how fun on the page it was. I had a smile ear to ear every issue I read, and sometimes that's what comics should be too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. James Tynion really celebrated some of the more absurd, kind of things about the DC multiverse, and the Turtles have their own multiverse and crossing them over. But my favorite aspect of Batman TMNT 3 is the art from Freddie Williams II. Just a shameocracy that man is not on as the primary artist on his own like Nightwing series or something. Love the art in that book. The story is so much fun. Love it.
Yeah, it's a great little series. It's one that people, I want to say, didn't see coming, because the series has grown a bit over time. But it's fun. I mean, it sells well. It's what people, I think you said it well, what people kind of want comics to be in some cases, something they could pick up, enjoy, read. And in many cases, many longtime readers found this and what Snyder did with Last Night on Earth to be the Batman series they enjoyed most this year, which is really telling.
All right. So what's your number 7?
Number 7 is Daredevil by Chip Zdarsky. Mark Cicchetto is the primary artist. And holy cow, special shout out to Sergeant Batts for donating the first 3 issues to me to get me started on this book when I was kind of on an anti-Chip Zdarsky bender. And he's like, you need to check these out. I was like, all right, I will. And I have not looked back. This, as it's gone on now, in hindsight, I think we're on 15 issues. This is my favorite Daredevil I've ever read, second only to Miller's historic run. I'm absolutely in love. The only down that I've had on this is when Cicchetto's off the book and they put some mediocre fill-in artist on it, and I'm like, oh. And then every time Cicchetto comes back, you're just like, oh, so good. It's a mature book in many ways. It doesn't even feel like a Marvel book. It almost feels like it feels like the Netflix show in a lot of ways, and it's an adult drama. But there is superhero theatrics, which is what comics need, especially superhero comics. It's never a dull moment. He's interjecting all these great character moments, from Foggy Nelson all the way to Wilson Fisk, being portrayed in a way we've never seen before. Spider-Man makes a couple of really great appearances that I'm just like, oh, I love this. I love this book. I look forward to it every week, and it's not slowing down. I can't praise it enough.
Yeah, Chip's doing a great job of threading 3 fantastic character arcs. You know, you have the Daredevil. You know, he's being brought down, Matt Murdock, because, you know, he's brought down. You know, something happens, and he kind of lost hope in himself, and he's building himself back up. Then you have Cole North being introduced. You know, he's the straight cop, you know, come into Hell's Kitchen, who's going to do the right thing, and you can see that he's starting to change his mind and see Hell's Kitchen for what it is. Then you have Wilson Fisk trying to go the straight and narrow and give up his criminal roots behind, or criminal past behind him, and get in with the big mover, political mover and shakers, and he's not being accepted, you know, and he's kind of a fish out of water. And it's the character arcs are just all perfect, and I love that series. I can't believe he's doing 3 of them at the same time, and they're all wonderful.
Yeah.
It's a great series. It is nice. I do think you get a lot of comparisons to Frank Miller, and that last time somebody actually had some reverence for the character. And I think if you look at what he's done, both on the Fantastic Four work he did a couple of years ago, but here, the one thing you can say about Zdarsky is he tries to tell stories that do not set out to defy reader expectations. They set to really go into the core of what that character is. You pick up one of his books and the characters feel like themselves. And as long as he keeps doing that, people are going to keep loving it.
All right. What's your number 6, Ash?
All right. Number 6, it's weird. This is a telling point about the top 5 of my list, because this book right here is my current favorite book to read. I can't wait for each issue. It is Ascender by Jeff Lemire. And boy, did this book come out of nowhere. I was not a person who was like, oh, Jeff Lemire. I've heard people talk about his name. I've read some of his stuff, and I was like, eh. And then I picked up Ascender just out of the blue. I was like, it's a number 1. I'm going to try it. The first read through, I was like, it's okay. And then I read it again because I was going to do a review for my channel. And the second time I read it, I was like, oh, wow, I really like this. And then when I did my review, if you've ever watched my videos, I pretty much go page by page. So almost like a third reading. And each single time it was like better and better and better. And now that it's 7 issues in, I feel like I'm going through withdrawals, missing, you know, like I cannot wait. Depending on how this series ends, I think this could just be a masterpiece. And I tell people, if you're interested in this book, or if you want to know more about it, it's essentially a Star Wars type comic. It's a space fantasy with an ensemble cast of characters. The main character is a female protagonist, a little girl, but she has all of the elements that make her charming, interesting character, the way the original Super Sons, you know, Tomasi's Super Sons did, that sort of childlike naivete and innocence and the whimsical nature. But then there's a great supporting cast of characters. There's a history to this world because, as a lot of people know, there was a Descender series before it. You absolutely do not need to read Descender any more than you need to watch the Star Wars prequels to watch Star Wars. They will complement each other in many ways, but they're broken off by 10 years and a different cast of characters and events. Descender is a complete sci-fi story. Ascender adds magic. So it's like a whole new, like, oh, there's magic in this world. It's just this great adventure. It's not trying to be anything super complex or deep. It's just trying to almost be like what Lucas was doing with Star Wars and be a hero's journey and just have a fun adventure with characters that you could love and exciting new places and cheer on a story of good versus evil. I cannot speak about this book, and we don't have enough time. I'll stop now.
Yeah, I'm getting back into the Jeff Lemire bandwagon. I'm reading Black Hammer right now, and Ascender's on my to-do list, but I have missed the boat.
You know, it's a really good series. It also, for those who don't know, the first issue was offered as a no-risk comic, and it was one of the cases where you could bring the comic back to the shop if you didn't like it and get your money back. You know, no questions asked. And for the retailers, it also had that benefit of you could return it. And again, no questions asked. So it was very much a come in, try this out. We know you're going to be hooked. And people weren't bringing the comic back. It was a great comic. I think it suffers from not necessarily bad marketing, just not enough. People do not know this book exists, and it is when people read it, it catches people. So it's a great book, a lot of good depth. I think Ash did a great job of describing, how good this book is.
All right, Ash, what's your number 5 comic?
Now, number 5 is Doomsday Clock. This might actually be higher on my list when I finish it today, but it's Jeff Johns doing what Jeff Johns does, and you guys have talked about Doomsday Clock to the nth degree, I guess. I don't know how much more I can add to it. If people are reading Doomsday Clock, they know how good it is. I'm sad that I haven't read it for various reasons because of what DC. I'm not going to get into that, but Doomsday Clock is absolutely something that's should be on everyone's list if you're a DC fan at all.
Yeah, Doomsday Clock is fantastic. You just think of the what you have to do a sequel to the most famous, or maybe the most important comic book ever. Watchmen, Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, totally up to the task. Being reverential about DC's comics history and the great character that is Superman. I can't believe the amount of work that went into that. It sucks that it was late, but it is a masterpiece in its own work, or in its own right.
Yeah, I Doomsday Clock, again, it suffered from delays, and which is a shame, because if you sit down, you read the whole collected edition, and it will be, of course, printed that way as one giant book. It was a great follow-up. It was almost the yin and the yang of the original Watchmen, where Watchmen was a very pessimistic, very dark view of society and the world and what people get up to. Doomsday Clock was a optimistic look in the end. It was how you recover from that darkness. It was a perfect explanation in a lot of ways of how DC changed with the New 52 and kind of the venture into more grim territory, and then what Rebirth was. And so this was the mission statement of Rebirth, of bringing back hope in a world that had gone very dark. So great series, absolutely worth picking up, and I think will be remembered for many years to come.
Excellent point. So Ash, what's the number 4 series?
Number 4 is a little bit of a cheat. I know it's 2 series, but it really, they can only be one, and that's House of X Powers of 10. Jonathan Hickman defied all expectations for me. I am a massive X-Men fan, and I've been a massive X-Men snob for the past 20 years. I just can't even get into X-Men. I tried with Grant Morrison because, hey, he's Grant Morrison, and even he couldn't get me back on the wagon. And when, excuse me, when this new book was coming out, you remember, Wes, I was a bit of a pessimist, and he sold me. He hooked me by the 3rd issue and never looked back. And not only was it a great story for all the reasons we've talked about in depth, but it's the best X-Men book I've read in 20 years, at least, or more. It goes up there amongst the best X-Men stuff I've ever read. It's a phenomenal story. I absolutely believe it took Hickman 2 years to write, because it's just so in depth. There's so much to it. I don't want to beleaguer the point, but it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's also, in my opinion, the most important comic series of the year. House of X Powers of 10, released in 12 sequential weeks, basically propped up the sales of the entire industry and put the comic market into the green for 2019. Without it, I think there would have been another year in the red, and sales declines for the entire industry. And it just, rising tide, raises all ships. It's done so much good for Marvel Comics, and in my opinion, probably the best comic story of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all in all, and that's true. There are two series that are one. I think in Hickman's words, a great series, definitely helped the industry out. If you think of a world without Hickman coming on to X-Men, and just you look at Age of X-Man kind of continuing on into the summer, and then whatever was going to fall on after that by Rosenberg, it was going to be a mess. The industry would have been in very bad shape. It's astonishing if you really sit back and you think about how much that one series brought money and readers into comics. It's staggering.
All right, Ash, you've knocked out Doomsday Clock, House of X, Powers of 10. I cannot wait to hear your top 3 list. What's number 3?
Well, I hope it doesn't disappoint, and I wish this one was even higher on my list, because I have a great personal attachment to it. But number 3 is Hawkman by Robert Venditti and Brian Hitch. I put this on the list because issues 8 through 12 came out in 2019. That's the second story arc. and it is one of the greatest, like, grand finale, come to finish. I was like wanting to jump up and cheer when I was reading this book. This was everything I love well, not everything, but what I love in great superhero comics. It was some of the most heroic feats. Like I said, you just had those feelings well up inside you of, I just want to cheer the hero, fighting the bad guy. It's not a complex book. It's so simple. And I think those are the hardest books to write. I keep coming back to some of these, that trope. Everyone who's read Hawkman, I think, gets it. And I think so many other people just haven't pulled the trigger yet. If you're going to read Hawkman, there's 2 volumes now. Know that the first volume doesn't end, like, it doesn't have the end. Issue number 7 is the actual end of the first arc. So you got to read the whole series through 12 and then make up your own minds. I love this book so much. I can go on. I'm not gonna.
Robert Venditti is my favorite comic writer, and it's books like Hawkman. Just the reimagining and the reconstruction of the character's history to form a new tapestry, a new understanding of him reincarnating across space and time, but for a reason. He's essentially atoning for the sins of his past to save as many people in his new lifetime as the ones he took back in his past lifetime. It's something that everyone can relate to. Those types of stories have been told for thousands of years. They're timeless for a reason. Hawkman is a fantastic comic series.
It really is one of the best ongoings. I mean, you notice in your list, there's a lot of comics that are limited series or, the event type comics. Doomsday Clock, just a character with an ongoing series that was really well done. Like Daredevil, I think Venditti gets the character, is bringing something new without pissing all over the past, and just well-loved character. Again, another case of a comic that is not nearly promoted enough by its parent, by DC. For all that it does, it gets the short end of the stick way too often that way.
All right, Ash, I know I'm champing at the bit. What's your number 2 comic?
My number 2 comic is one of the best comics I've read in a long time. And it's a Marvel comic, and that surprised the heck out of me. It's SpiderMan Life Story. That book, I'm a little embarrassed to say, as a 40-plus-year-old male, that it brought tears in my eyes. And not just in one time. There is so much heart and emotion in this book. It ends on such a fantastic note, telling the complete life story of Peter Parker, the actual Spider-Man, and it has to change things throughout history, and it has to make some things, because if we did get to see the Peter Parker's life story, things wouldn't play out the way that they do. But Zdarsky, you said it before, he treats the character with such reverence and doesn't try to defy your expectations. He tries to dig in and say, this is what is the heart of this character, this is the essence, this is what people love, this is what I love as a creator, and he just brings it out. And again, the reason why this book is so high on the list for me is not just because the story is good, which it is. It has so much raw emotion, and that's so hard to do in a comic book. I urge everyone to pick up this collection. It's a classic.
Yeah, it's such an ambitious undertaking to tell the story of Peter Parker, and it's 5 issues, or is it 6?
6.
It's 6 issues, yeah. So it's 10 years per volume, and just the amount of things that they added in there. The Clone Saga, you got Secret Wars, you got all the kind of the more modern stuff. You got the Venom suit. So much stuff that Zdarsky he wouldn't say he crammed in there. He put it in there very perfectly. It's an excellently told story. And Mark Bagley on Spider-Man, yes, please, every time. Maybe my favorite Spider-Man artist. It's hard if I want to talk about it, but he's definitely up there in the top 3 for me. Love Spider-Man Life Story.
It was a great series. I mean, as a combination of 6, you think about that collection, it's going to tell a wonderful story. And I mean, everything you guys said was perfect. It is a writer paying attention to the character, doing it well. And we're about to get a bunch of the end comics, one-shots out of Marvel, which kind of tell the conclusion to the story of these characters in kind of almost a what-if type way. It'll be one of their gimmicks that they do. This comic was the way you do it right. And it was told from beginning to end. Really great series and highly recommended.
I'm going to be honest, Ash. Well, you covered all the stuff that I thought could be your number one. I am flabbergasted as what your number one comic series. I think you're going to blow my mind here, buddy. What's your number one?
Oh, I don't think I am. My number one is, I could go on. I have to rein it in, Ash, rein it in. My number one is Curse of the White Knight, by one of our favorite creators, Sean Gordon Murphy, writing a story about one of our favorite characters, Batman. And the reason why it's number one is the last two issues. Issues 4 and 5 are some of the best comic issues I've ever read. I can't. This guy gets better and better as a writer. It reminds me a lot of watching a young Frank Miller back in the day when he was kind of just taking on the writing tasks, and you could see his early stuff was very raw, and it just got better and better. And then he did things like Dark Knight Returns. That's what I'm seeing here. And the reason why it's surpassed other books on the list is because comics are a visual medium, and it may not be the best story, the best writing that I've read all year, but as a whole, when I put the whole package together, the art, the concepts, the characters, the story, all of it, it's a near perfect package. His art is phenomenal. And, unfortunately, some of these other books are great, but, they just suffered in other areas that held them down. I cannot sell this book enough. I think right now it's even better than the original White Knight, which was my top book of the year last year. I got to rein it in because I could just talk about this book for hours, Wes.
Sean Gordon Murphy, it would have been very easy for him to just kind of retread the first story or just play on that, but he's really flipped everything on its head, and he's taken his Murphyverse in a completely different direction. So I give him kudos for that. That takes bravery, to not go with the original, the essence and feel, and just do something different, because it is his universe, and he's adding so much depth and so many layers to the characters and the lore of his Gotham, which is different than the Gotham that we read in continuity. And it's the art, man. It's the art that does it for me. He's one of the best artists in the industry today, and he's got his style is quintessentially Sean Gordon Murphy, and it's unmistakably his.
Exactly.
It's a great book. It's a great follow. People's sophomore efforts rarely come out like this. It is, like you say, they retread elements. They try and maybe do some fan service in some directions they didn't go the first time and get about their story. He's bringing something new to the table. It's a great series. I'm curious kind of how this grows over the next 2 to 5 years. He says he has a lot more stories in him to kind of build out this whole little corner of the DC universe. And it shines a light on the problem that DC has, where you have John's doing Doomsday Clock with a really nice universe that now feels like it's in a pocket. You got Snyder doing Last Night of Earth, again, a really good universe, but again, seems out of the main continuity. And then you have Sean Gordon Murphy with a wonderful story. So you have all these really great takes on Batman and Superman and these characters. They're not part of the core. So that's DC's challenge as we go into 2020. But great pick and great series.
All right, so yeah, wonderful list, Ash. I'm going to just name my 10 real fast, and we're going to wrap this up. My number 10 comic series is Blade Runner 2019. Number 9, Batman TMNT 3. Number 8, Daredevil. Number 7, SpiderMan Live Story. Number 6, Killmonger. Number 5, Criminal. Number 4, Hawkman. Number 3, These Savage Shores. Number 2, Doomsday Clock. And number 1 was House of X, Powers of X. House of X, Powers of 10. Come on, Wes, you're not a noob. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me today, talking about all these wonderful comics. A lot of people like to say, oh, the industry is dying. There's nothing good out there. There is so much great out there. The industry is actually growing in sales this year. So don't believe what the naysayers are saying. There is good quality comic books out there. If you come here to Thinking Critical, you go to Perch's channel, you go to Ash's channel, and we're gonna show you all the best stuff. And we want people to come back into comics and be reading comics on a daily basis like we do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for indulging me. I know I get a little long-winded on my stuff. But it was great to talk about comics with you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Great list, great conversation, and go read comics, guys.
Absolutely. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.